that eval, I think it's like 40 something different verticals that a business has to do. Mm-hmm. There's make a PowerPoint, do this legal analysis, write up this little web app, all this stuff. And the eval is, do experts prefer the output of the model relative to other experts? For a lot of the things that a business has to do. Now, these are small, well-scoped tasks. These don't get the kind of complicated, open-ended, creative work that figuring out a new product. These don't get a lot of collaborative team things. But a coworker that you can assign an hour's worth of tasks to and get something you like better back 74 or 70% of time if you want to pay less is still pretty extraordinary. If you went back to the launch of ChatGPT 3 years ago and said we were going to have that in 3 years, most people would say absolutely not. And so as we think about how enterprises are going to integrate this, it's no longer like just that it can do code. It's all of these knowledge work tasks you can kind of farm out to the AI. And a kind of recent cool example here is we built the Sora Android app using Codex. And they did it in like less than a month. They used a huge amount. One of the nice things about working at OpenAI is you don't get any limits on Codex. They used a huge amount of tokens, but they were able to do what would normally have taken a lot of people much longer. And Codex kind of mostly did it for us. And you can imagine that going much further, where entire companies can build their products using lots of compute. The overhang of the economic value that I believe 5.2 represents relative to what the world has figured out how to get out of it so far is so huge that even if you froze the model at 5.2, how much more like value can you create and thus revenue can you drive? I bet a huge amount. In fact, you didn't ask this, but if I can go on a rant for a second. We used to talk a lot about this 2x2 matrix of short timelines, long timelines, slow takeoff, fast takeoff, and where we felt at different times the kind of probability was shifting and that was going to be, you could kind of understand a lot of the decisions and strategy that the world should optimize for based off of where you were going to be on that 2x2 matrix. There's like a z-axis in my head, in my picture of this that's emerged, which is small overhang, big overhang. And I kind of thought that, I guess I didn't think about that hard, but like my retro on this is I must have assumed that the overhang was not going to be that massive, that if the models had a lot of value in them, the world was pretty quickly going to figure out how to deploy that. But it looks to me now like the overhang is going to be massive in most of the world. You'll have these like areas like, some set of coders that'll get massively more productive by adopting these tools. But on the whole, you have this crazy smart model that, to be perfectly honest, most people are still asking this similar questions they did in the GPT-4 realm. Scientists, different, coders, different. Maybe knowledge work is going to get different. But there's a huge overhang. And that has a bunch of very strange consequences for the world. We have not wrapped our head around all the ways that's going to play out yet. Let's say that an AI company today might be generating something on the order of 10 trillion tokens a day out of frontier models. More, but not, it's not like a quadrillion tokens for anybody, I don't think. Let's say there's 8 billion people in the world, and let's say on average these are, I think, totally wrong, but let's say the average number of tokens outputted by a person per day is like 20,000. You can then start to, and the token, to be fair, then we'd have to compare the output tokens of a model provider today, not all the tokens consumed. But you can start to look at this and you can say, we're going to have these models at a company be outputting more tokens per day than all of humanity put together. And then 10 times that, and then 100 times that. And, in some sense, it's like a really silly comparison. But in some sense, it gives a magnitude for like how much of the intellectual crunching on the planet is like human brains versus AI brains. And that's kind of, the relative growth rates there are interesting.